I call consistency the other C word because I think it is overrated, for one. It is misused, for two. And a lot of us feel a tremendous amount of shame because we are 1,000% convinced we can't be consistent.
Hey, Squirrels! Welcome to AVHD, where ADHD isn't some clinical diagnosis, it's just life. I'm AV, your always honest tour guide through this beautiful mess. Over here, we're not about fixing yourself. We're about figuring out how to actually enjoy your life as you are. So grab a snack and let's go. Welcome back, Squirrels, to another episode of AVHD. Here's what we know. ADHD people don't wait in. We cannonball straight in, all in, immediately, completely, everything all together, all at once. New projects, new ideas, new versions of ourselves. And then 6 weeks later, we're gone. And we call that being inconsistent. We call it a character flaw, and we call it proof that we just can't follow through. But today we're going to blow all of that up because I am sick of it. My guest today spent years with a psychotherapist before she figured out she had ADHD. And then she did what a lot of us do. She blew up the old model and built something new. She now coaches neurodivergent entrepreneurs who are done letting their brains run their businesses into the ground. She helps them focus, follow through, and stop abandoning the things they actually care about. She also hosts the ADHD-ish podcast and splits her time between the Oregon coast and the California desert, which adds transitions that her ADHD brain doesn't super love. But she's recorded over 300 episodes without missing a single week with an ADHD brain. So I'm going to let that land for a second while you're telling yourselves you can't be consistent. And Diann Wingert, thank you so much for being here.
I've so been looking forward to this conversation, Avi. And I guess since you let in with the podcast, I think that's a perfect example of how you can be consistent at something when the conditions are right.
100%. My kids love to call me consistently inconsistent. They're like, we know something about you. You're consistently inconsistent. I'm like, sure, that's fine. I will own that.
Well, first of
I'll
all,
run
I
with
think,
it.
yeah, and you know what? I call consistency the other C word because I think it is overrated, for one. It is misused, for two. And a lot of us feel a tremendous amount of shame because we are 1,000% convinced we can't be consistent. But if you look closer at the way we live our lives, there are some things that we are remarkably consistent at. We just don't think about it that way.
Right. But when an ADHD entrepreneur says to you, I'm just not a consistent person, what is actually going on underneath that?
Well, I learned a long time ago that when it comes to folks with ADHD, the answer to every single question I'm ever asked about working with them starts with, it depends. And the reason why I say it depends is that if you know one person with ADHD, you know one person with ADHD. You do have to have a certain number of the traits, characteristics, and behaviors to qualify for the diagnosis. But there is so much variability within how we present that it's one of the reasons why there's so much confusion around ADHD, because there are certain things that all of us do. And then there are certain things that some of us do and certain things that some of us do some of the time and not at other times. So it's super confusing. But when someone tells me they can't be consistent, one of the first things I want to know is, how committed are they to defending that belief? Because sometimes when we are convinced that we can't be consistent, it's not even our own belief. It's something that we have internalized because it has been said to us and said about us by others, going way back to childhood, and we just believed it. And it's really sad because I think we can be remarkably consistent at things that are aligned with our values, that are aligned with our goals, and for which we have the right systems, structures, and supports, and sometimes supervision. So the first thing I want to know is,
Right.
are you fully committed to that belief? And people will say, what do you mean committed to that belief? And so that's where the fun begins, because I don't think we really realize it is a belief. It is not a fact, and it may not even be true. So if someone just believes it with their whole heart, and like I'll say, could you pass a lie detector test? saying, I can't be consistent because you literally believe it so strongly, that's going to be a different nut to crack. If someone says, well, I believe it because I have the receipts, I'll say, for example, but have you ever been consistent in anything in your life, whether you intended to or not? So we start to unpack the nature of the belief first. You can kind of loosen it up around the edges a little bit, and then we can start to have fun with what kind of conditions help you be more consistent. And sometimes I'll just be downright oppositional. And when someone has like 10 toes down, I can't be consistent. Say, okay, but what if you could? Like I believe you. I have no reason to doubt you. I mean, you're the expert in you. What the hell do I know? But let's just say fact. You cannot be consistent. Okay. But what if you could? And sometimes, and there's no one thing that works with everybody. So I got a big ass bag of tricks and I'll just keep
Yeah.
pulling different tool out until I get to it. But sometimes a person will fully believe I can't be consistent. I've never been consistent. I don't know how to be consistent. I'm allergic to consistency. But when I hit them with the, okay, I believe you, but what if you could? What comes out of their mouth next is amazing, and they don't even realize it's in there. Because once you loosen your fingers from the death grip that you've got around that belief, sometimes your ADHD creativity kicks in, and then you can just literally spit out exactly what conditions you would need to create in order to be consistent. I'm like, I rest my case.
Right. I especially love it when parents tell me I can't be consistent. And I'm like, oh, cool. So your kids are dead? They're like, no, what? What do you mean? I'm like, wait, you mean you fed them yesterday? And the day
Yeah.
before? And the day before that? And you bathe them and you wake them up every day and they get to school on time and they're wearing clean clothes and
Or clothes.
or clothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so like your child is alive, thriving, doing well.
Yep.
That's proof of at least some measure of ability to be consistent.
It's so true.
Maybe
It's
in a
I think
different way.
But it's that, there's so many things that are related to this. First of all, when we say I can't be consistent or we believe we can't be consistent or it's just unbelievably strenuous to be consistent, sometimes we just absolutely are applying the wrong standards. Like it's like the perfectionism that is often a ride along with consistency is like if I can't do it perfectly, it doesn't fricking count.
Mhm.
It's this all or none thinking that so many of us are prone to, and so when we say, "I can't be consistent," I can't be consistent all the time. I can't be perfectly consistent. I can't be consistent at everything. I can't be consistent to my perfectionistic standards. I can't be consistent based on what my mom has been telling me since I was 5 years old. So, oftentimes, it's like a blanket statement or a blanket belief, but within it, it's like, yeah, if I had to live up to those standards, I wouldn't even take a shot at it either. And frankly, when you've been pummeled with this belief
Yeah.
about yourself and internalized it, many people will start to avoid doing anything that requires consistency because they are trying to avoid adding to the endless pile of disappointments and regrets. So if I don't start, I can't fuck it up. If I don't start that thing that requires me to be consistent, I do not have to face yet one more disappointment. And it was why, even though I have a very successful podcast that is now coming up on 310 weekly episodes, that's over 5 years of never missing a single week. However, the backstory, which is equally important, is I put off launching it for 2 solid years, during which time I hired not one, but two podcast launch coaches. I read dozens of books about launching a podcast, listened to hundreds of podcast episodes about launching a podcast. I had already named it. I already had the show art. I had already signed up for the hosting. I had the professional equipment. I had every fucking thing, Avi, every fucking thing. And I still couldn't pull the trigger because my unconscious belief was, this is going to be so embarrassing if I can't maintain it. So better not to start. Didn't even realize that's what I was thinking. Sound
I love
familiar,
that.
right?
That's such an opportunity to be so freaking honest. I normally would have done exactly that thing, but I started AVHD without anything. This is the same Yeti microphone that I purchased 3 days before I recorded my first podcast episode. I got on and started talking about nothing and babbling and talking about nothing. And even now, I'm listening to you and I'm like, I should have done it that way. I'm like, wait, stop, stop.
Oh, no.
I jumped in and just started. So I'm 2 years in at this point. And when people hear about me and they try and understand what Alista, what the business side of things does, the way they understand it, the way they know me, the way it all makes sense is because of AVHD. It's because of the podcast. It's because people got a chance to know me, even when I was unpolished, even when I was stumbling. And despite knowing that, despite seeing my 2 year metrics, I'm hearing about your metrics. And there's a part of my ADHD self that's like, if I had waited, then maybe I could have prepared to be more immediately successful. And I think that's probably a trap that a lot of us put ourselves in.
Oh, girl, probably. You know it. Like, listen, I have been working exclusively with entrepreneurs with ADHD traits for a decade, and as a therapist for many more years before that. And I've had ADHD all my life and passed it on to all three of my children from two different marriages. So those are some very potent ADHD genes. The force is strong with this one. And I will tell you what I have learned from working with people like us is that if you have to get it right before you can press go, your life as an entrepreneur is going to be very slow, very tedious, and very painful if you, in fact, stay in the game at all. If you are more on the impulsive side of things, where, as you say, you cannonball into the deep end of the pool before you even bother to look if there's water, you will make more mistakes because you will take more action. And it is in the taking action, not in the planning, not in the procrastinating, not in the perfectionating, and not in the preparing, that you actually learn what works. So if I were to say, which is better, to be more impulsive and impatient and have wildly unrealistic expectations about the task ahead of you versus have everything all lined up, all your ducks in a row and quacking in tune, and have every possible roadblock down the road anticipated and dealt with, I would much rather say jump in, because you will learn what works and what doesn't. And the more you jump, the more mistakes you make, the more resilient you become, because you have to figure things out on the fly because you're always flying by the seat of your pants. Here's how I got consistent, because this is allegedly what we're here to talk about. I want to be very clear to the listeners that we are not talking about just fly by the seat of your pants, just wing it, literally blindfold yourself before every important decision, spin yourself around and play pin the tail on the donkey. Uh, we're not talking about eliminate all planning, eliminate all preparation, just be as reckless as you possibly can, because a lot of harm can be done and a lot of bills can rack up and other human lives can be affected. But what we are talking about is that voice in your head that says the prime directive is to avoid making mistakes. That is probably related to childhood trauma. It is definitely related to knowing early on in life that one of these things is not like the others. You are a different kind of kid. And usually that is not well received by either the adults or the other kids, even the ones who adore you and want nothing but the best for you. So we grow up thinking the way we do things is just not right. And I think actually the most damaging thing of all the things that come along with not knowing you have ADHD until whatever time you find out is that we lose the ability to trust ourselves. And I think that's one of the most important things we need to recover in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, is being able to trust your instincts and also to recognize the difference between an impulse and intuition, which takes a little bit of patience and time because when we just think, well, I have a really good feeling about this, sometimes that's intuition. Sometimes that's insight. Sometimes that's business acumen that other people wish they had. And sometimes it's impatience, it's boredom,
Ego.
it's dopamine seeking. And so learning that, you can be consistent when you're doing the right things for the right reasons in the right ways. You really can. But you got to know
So
what
let's
those
go back to the
conditions are.
podcast.
Yeah.
As you said
So,
that missing a single week with
mhm.
an ADHD brain, how the fuck?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think we have to get in the Wayback Machine and go back to the 2 years in having made I'd spent a lot of money on the launch consultants and the equipment and all this stuff. I'm like, "What the hell, Diann?" What actually eventually got me off the fence is a couple things. One, I knew I needed accountability and I knew I needed support. And I also know that I refuse to have any kind of shame about that. It's something that I see with a lot of us who have this stubbornly self sufficient mindset that I'm not going to do it unless it can be perfect. I'm not going to do it unless I can be consistent and I have to do every freaking bit of it on my own. I say, fuck that. You're gonna be limited to very few things if that's what you think you need to do. So and you've built your whole business around people getting the right kind of support, so they don't have to try to do everything on their own. So what I eventually did was I joined an accountability group in the form of a challenge. It was a 4-week challenge. It was with a group that I was already familiar with. I don't know if it would have worked as well if they were total strangers, but maybe at the point I was at, it would have worked just as well. It was a 4-week challenge and you had to publicly acknowledge there were about 25 people in the group. There were 5 groups of 5. So it was the bigger group, and then there was the smaller group where you had that more intimate accountability. We had to publicly declare at the beginning of the challenge, at the end of these 4 weeks, I will have. And I especially like the fact that we were encouraged to have a good, better, and best outcome because that really works with the perfectionism. If I get the best possible outcome at the end of the 4 weeks, I will have. But if I get better or good, so that you are going to win no matter what if you set your expectations so that the good outcome is achievable with support and strategy. You stated it publicly. We all checked in with each other every day. Every little step we took towards the goal, it was in a shared Trello board, so we shared that. I took a very active role very early on, supporting other people in a very active way. Not because give to get. That's not how I roll. I'm not a transactional person, but because I believed it would put me in the mindset that I needed to be in by
Mhm.
just assuming I'm not only am I going to win, we're all going to win. And then we supported each other within the pod of 5, but also it was a friendly competition between the groups. And there was a prize at the end. So you not only got your desired outcome, which was a launched frickin' podcast, but also we were competing for a prize, which was valuable to me. So it was not just the accountability, but the public accountability. It was the friendly competition. It was the level of support. And, I've been successful at many things in my life, and almost none of them have been in secret. I need to publicly declare I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it by this specific time because without the public declaration and the frickin' deadline, let's not forget how important those deadlines are, folks. That is
Mm.
what got me off the fence. And I did one more thing. We, folks with ADHD in particular, and women with ADHD in particular, especially those of us who are late diagnosed, anytime in adulthood, we have already internalized a fuck ton of, don't make a mistake because you'll be embarrassed and ashamed and don't do anything that other people might not like or might criticize you for or might judge you for or might so most of us have imposter syndrome. Well, I like to call that fraudy feeling, and also rejection sensitivity. So your perfectionism, your procrastination, your imposter syndrome, your rejection sensitivity, all of that stuff thrives in a dark room. There used to be a slogan when I was a psychotherapist. It may still be around. You're only as sick as your secrets. Now,
Mhm.
that's not talking about planning for the launch of a product or book or podcast or whatever as an entrepreneur. It's the things that we don't feel comfortable talking about that
Mhm.
fester and that hold us back. So I think the things that we don't share, they're unchecked and they probably are amplified. But what is important about when you are getting ready to launch, most of us are spending way too much time and way too much attention paying attention to what other people are doing. And while I understand the value of market research, when you're just getting started and you're already scared shitless that you're going to make a mistake and nobody's going to care and people are going to call you out, and that's not the time to pay attention to what your so-called competition is doing, because you will just keep finding reasons for why you think you're not good enough or you're not ready. I literally put hardcore blinders on when I decided that, you know what, you're never going to get out of the starting blocks if you don't stop paying attention to what other people are doing. They're not you, and you don't need to be concerned with them. Once I was further down the road and I wanted to differentiate myself from other people in my space, then it was important for me to pay attention to other people's messaging and pricing and how they position their offers, but not in the beginning, especially if you are worried about making mistakes. I don't relish making mistakes, but they no longer have the meaning for me that they used to. I just think that's just part of it. And sometimes we make mistakes because we're moving too fast. But most of the mistakes we make are either inconsequential or they can be corrected after the fact.
100%. And sometimes they give you valuable information. Like my assistant accidentally sent out the wrong pricing to someone, the wrong pricing link, something that costs close to $1,000. We were running a promotion on it, I don't know, 5 years ago for like $50. The wrong link went out. She sent the corrected link and the person responded, I'm not paying that for whatever it was. And that to me, was it a mistake? I mean, I guess, whatever, but it was an opportunity to uncover valuable information. It gave me an opportunity to ask the person, are you even interested in this thing, regardless of the price? If you are, let's figure it out. If you're not, like, shake my hand and let's part ways because you're wasting my time and it's bugging me. But it wasn't a mistake that I could yell at my assistant for, but it was an opportunity to uncover valuable information, not only about the product and the way it's positioned and the person I was targeting and the pricing, but also about the perceived value, also about the person I was interacting with, also about where they're at. It's an opportunity for tons of information if I look at it that way, as opposed to beating myself or up or someone on my team up over an inconsequential mistake.
And even if it's a consequential mistake, even if it's a genuinely cringe-worthy mistake, if you're going to play in the entrepreneurial game, that's
Yeah.
part of what you signed up for. Now, most of us think, yeah, but do I have to make them publicly? Do I have to make so many of them? Let me tell you the story I just shared with you about my very delayed podcast launch. I spoke about that on the podcast. I cannot tell you how many people reached out to me and thanked me for that. One of my other most frequently commented on episodes was the one where I spent an entire episode talking about a failed program launch. It was a failed program launch. And actually, it wasn't a failed program launch. But that's how I thought of it at the time, and I thought, "Am I gonna just continue to feel shitty about this and be convinced I better not launch anything for the rest of my business life? Or can I learn from it? Can other people learn from it? And can I help reduce the shame and stigma about taking a chance and getting it wrong?" I cannot tell you how much positive feedback I got from people who said, "You did that, and I look up to you, and I admire you, and I respect you. I feel so much better now." And I'm like, that's the game we're in, folks. If you really want to fulfill your potential and express yourself through a business, you can't set avoiding mistakes as a goal. It will F you up every single time and will prevent you from being consistent because you'll be spending so much energy trying to do only the right things that you won't find out what the right things are so that you can be consistent at them. It all
And
works
what you're saying
together.
is so important because there's such a tremendous fear of vulnerability that is not, it's not stupid. It is very, very reasonable to have that fear of vulnerability, especially if you've encountered people who have tried to take advantage of that in the past. If you're around people who are net takers, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble when being vulnerable around people like that. And I found this a lot in with my strategy calls. People do not want to do a strategy call. The positioning of the strategy call is it is a reverse engineering of your vision in your own business. I'm not selling you anything of mine. I don't have anything to give you after that. There's nothing beyond that. It's simply clarity of vision. But if I have clarity of vision, it behooves me to act on that vision. If I act on that vision, I have to put myself in places where I have to ask for help or support or whatever. I have to create connections in spaces. I have to, by definition, be vulnerable in an intentional direction in order to achieve the business success that I want to achieve.
I mean, some parts of this have to be fun. And coming back to the consistency thing, when you find the things that you're naturally good at, that you actually enjoy, that meet a need for your intended customers or clients, you will find ways to be more consistent at them. There's only 4 things that will get a person with ADHD to take action: interest, challenge, novelty, and urgency. When we're not really paying attention to, like, what am I really interested in and what challenges me in the right way? What is like game on, bitches? Versus, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, I would die if I try that." Like, the right kind of challenge, the right level of challenge. If we don't get clear about those things, we will always default to novelty and urgency, which is shiny object syndrome and doing everything at the last possible moment. That will never be sustainable, but it will feel like, I'm taking action, but it's not the kind of action that's going to lead us where we want to go. The stuff that we will and we can learn to be consistent at and actually build a successful business on are going to be the things that feed our natural interest and challenge us in the right way. And they exist for all of us. We just need to figure out which ones they are and not follow all the frickin' trends. Just because it worked for someone else, anybody that says, "I know the way," I'm sorry, that sounds like religion to me. There is no way.
Okay, well, Peter, it's like
It is
very
very,
cultish. It's
it's
weird.
very culty. It's very culty. They know what worked for them, if they're even being honest about it.
Right.
Um, but what will work for you is what will work for you. And that may be a very individual thing that you need to spend a little time figuring out, and you might need to get some help figuring out because it's hard to read the label from inside the jar.
And it's interesting because in our current sales economy, I guess, or whatever ecosystem, when people ask me what I sell and I say, "What do you need?" That freaks them out because they're like, "What do you do?" What I do, me specifically, I fill in the exact gap that exists in your business. If it can be done behind a computer and somebody can figure it out some way, the data will tell me the way that you need it done based on what hasn't worked in the past and based on what has worked in the data will always tell you. And then there is always a way to figure out the thing that you actually need that will actually solve the problem that you're actually having. But selling the actual solution, it feels uncomfortable from a purchasing perspective. And it kind of brings me back to something that you said in one of our conversations that I cannot stop thinking about. You said ADHD medication can help you point your brain at one object, but it doesn't do anything. I think you might have said it doesn't do to help you choose the right object.
Yeah, I basically it helps you sustain your focus longer at whatever you point your brain to. But if you're pointing your brain at Netflix or TikTok or YouTube, you're just going to waste more time on it. It does not help you choose which object to point your brain at. That's why I call it the magic pill, because a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm all over the place and I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other thing and I can't be consistent and I can't follow up and I don't know where I'm going half the time. I keep changing my mind, blah blah." So, it's like I just need to take the pill. I'm like, "Okay, if you are really good at wasting time, you'll be even better at it on medication." So you need more than that. But honestly, I think when people ask you what you sell and you say, "What do you
Mhm.
need?" Like, personally, I would be a little bit like, "Don't answer a question with a question."
Oh,
I
totally.
would
It
if
doesn't
I
work.
I no,
Don't
because
do what I used to do.
actually, you sell solutions for small business owners. Now,
Yeah.
people are gonna hear that and go, "What kind of solutions? Thank you for asking." Now we're in a conversation, right? Because we all have listen, if you have a small business, whether you're a solopreneur, you have a team, like whatever, there are things that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing because A, you don't like them, B, you don't do them consistently, probably because you don't like them. They're outside your zone of genius. They're probably outside your zone of excellence. You're only doing them because they need to be done, and you may not have someone who can do them for you. That is a problem you have a solution to. And most of us have that problem, whether we want to admit it or not. But so many of us are stubbornly self
Right.
sufficient and think, I
Exactly.
should be, the shoulds have got to stop, folks. Like, I should be able to do this on my own. When someone said, "Well, you did all that effort to start your podcast," like, don't you think you just should be able to just launch without a public declaration and a challenge and accountability? I said, "I can think whatever I want about what I need, but I still need it, so I'd rather
Mhm.
just don't fight the fact that I do better with public declarations, accountability, deadlines, and a friendly challenge and support." And I've decided not to have any shame about any of that. I used to, but it wasted a lot of time and created a lot of unnecessary suffering.
So, a friendly challenge and support, meaning you might make a public declaration that you don't follow through on. I started
Yeah.
75 hard twice last year. I did it publicly twice. I fell off halfway twice. I came to the conclusion that 75 hard is simply too rigid for myself. And I did it publicly. And it was, I mean, I guess it could be perceived as embarrassing, but it just was. Like, it wasn't, there's no value judgment in the fact that I'm still just as fat now as I was then. Like, it doesn't matter. I was fine then. I'm fine now. Everything's fine.
Sometimes we can't do something, not because we haven't created the right conditions. Like, when I think about the conditions for consistency,
Mm.
most of us need some form of accountability. Most of us need some skin in the game so that there is a reward to doing it and there's a consequence to not doing it. And we also need, we need support and we need deadlines and we need to break it down into manageable steps so it doesn't feel like we're pushing a freaking boulder up a steep hill. We need those conditions for our brain to be able to wrap itself around this thing and say, I could do that. Now, if we're only doing things that we've just got such a hard on for that, oh, I got to do this right now. Most of the time, that's a start strong and fizzle fast. And so that's okay, but don't assume that you're going to be able to convert something that you are just suddenly infatuated with. And if you have the right conditions, you're going to make it last and you're going to be consistent, because sometimes, like this thing with the medication, sometimes we're pointing this very powerful brain at something that really can't go the distance and it was never intended to. Like, I'll give you an example. I used to spend enormous amounts of money and time on whatever new hobby idea I had. I was a scuba diver. I was a quilter. I got into fencing. I did all kinds of interesting things. And when the idea was, piping hot at the top of the stack, like a brand new freaking
Mhm.
pan, I'm like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be the thing." I now refer to that as the soulmate phenomenon. I'm, like, so infatuated with this idea. It's the best idea I've ever had. This is gonna be the thing that's gonna so completely hold my interest. I will do this until the day I die. Well, that's never happened, but I thought it would. So I would let all the best of all the stuff, and then predictably, usually about 6 weeks, I would start to fall off the wagon. And eventually I would be like, what was I thinking? I don't even want to look at this thing anymore. So I eventually learned, you know what? Maybe you have 6-week experiments. So instead of diving in and assuming this is going to be a lifelong thing, maybe it's a 6-week fling, like a summer romance. And so you invest accordingly. You don't buy all the things. You don't sign up for all the things. You don't tell everybody this is your new thing. You just set it up like a 6-week experiment. At the 3-week point, you check in and say, am I loving this as much as I was on week 1? If you still are, continue. But if you're already starting to drop off, I finish what I started because I want to have the habit of completing things, and 6 weeks is manageable. But when I get to the end of 6 weeks and I'm like, I'm so glad I took 6 weeks of cello lessons, and I am now, and I did, I am now 100% okay with realizing I'm never going to play the cello and I can move on. And so there's no shame in it. But that was something that took a while to learn. If I want to create consistency, it has to be something that's built to last. And with my brain, most things aren't, and I'm okay with that now.
So I'm hearing a few things from you. There's radical, almost self-acceptance of the conditions that you require for your success. So you first
Mhm.
have to understand what the conditions are that you require for your success. You also have to not be ashamed of them. That sort of seems to me like a chicken egg scenario. Because maybe I have to try enough things to become less ashamed of the fact that I need more support. And maybe I need more support so I can try more things
I
and
would
to figure out the way consistency works for me.
That may be how it works for you. I think what I eventually came to is that I reached a point in my life, Avi, where I thought, you've had an interesting life. You have done a lot of interesting things. You've done some things that are pretty cringe and regrettable, and you have some shame and wish you hadn't done. But mainly, there were things that I started because I had passion and a sense of purpose, and I really wanted to do it. And so I didn't want to try to change who I am or how I am. I wanted to change what I made it mean. So,
Mm.
yes, you have to do things to figure out what kind of things you like and that you like well enough that you can stick with and actually have the kind of reward that you need, the ROI, so that it's worth it to you to stick with them so that you can create the conditions. But I think of radical self acceptance, which is one of the cornerstones of my coaching program. I think it is a choice and a habit. I don't think anyone can convince you to accept yourself and your ADHD and all that goes with it. I think it's something you have to decide, and having decided, give yourself permission, then you create the habits. And one of the habits is catching yourself being a bitch to yourself, catching yourself being a bully. We all have that soundtrack where we're like, why the fuck did you do that? What is the matter with you? I can't believe you did that again. You know, don't tell anybody about this one, or oh, this is embarrassing, or shouldn't you figure this out by now? We all have, and it's usually just a whole clusterfuck of thoughts that just gang up on you. I actually have a visualization, a couple of them that I created, where I imagine that my brain and my mind are a private club, and not just anybody can get in. And I have a bouncer outside that club. And the bouncer is this big, enormous guy who has the jacket that says security across the back. So before a thought can get into my mind and start messing things up for me, it has to get past that bouncer. And that bouncer knows my prime directive is radical self acceptance. If you're not on the list, bitch, you ain't getting in. It took a little while to start to unlearn the habit of beating up on myself and to start saying, that thought I'm not so sure about. You need to check in with the bouncer. But I made it fun and I made it like a game. And I also didn't feel any kind of way about it when I couldn't do it consistently because eventually I could.
I love the idea of a bouncer because the thoughts are not necessarily true. Just like statements are not necessarily true. Anyone can say anything or think anything that doesn't make it true, and that applies to ourselves as well. I say all kinds of bullshit that's nonsense that I should not spend another second thinking about. There's also a piece of removing the people who talk to you in that way. So
Mhm.
distancing yourself from the external people that either reinforce that internalized message that you have or are the contributors to the internalized message that was there in the first place, that doesn't necessarily mean cutting everyone out. But if radical self-acceptance is the primary directive, then that means if it's not good for me, it doesn't cross the threshold, period. And that's hard.
It is hard. Well, I think most of us have tremendous struggles with boundaries.
Yeah.
And a lot of us will say it's people pleasing. I think it's seeking safety
Yeah.
because most of us believe that any kind of conflict with others doesn't feel safe. And plenty of us have childhood trauma to back that up. So it's not necessarily that we are people pleasers, it's that we're seeking safety. Many of us are very sensitive, can pick up on moods of other people around us, even if they aren't engaging with us directly. And in order to feel safe, we just don't want to rock any boats. We don't want any trouble. But yeah, when it's, you should have a bouncer to your life as well as to your thoughts because having negative people that are always, mentioning your ADHD traits and say, "Why can't you just whatever, whatever?" Like, it's gonna be 10 times harder to make progress on the things that you want to address when you have literally people close to you who are betting against you on the daily. They don't need that much access, no matter who they are.
100%.
But that's tough.
It's super tough because these people come from every direction. It could be your mom, it could be your sister, it could be your spouse, it could be your first or second or third spouse. All we are doing is waking up every single day, doing the best that we can with what we have access to at this exact moment. That's what we're doing. That's what every single person around you is doing.
Mhm.
And some people might put on more of a bravado face to it. Some people might make it look a little more suave. Some people might make it look a little bit more messy or bumpy. Everybody is just doing their best. It looks smoother and it looks better and they're probably lying, at least a
Nobody
little bit.
nobody has it all figured out. I don't care how good their game face is. Nobody believing that will delay you from figuring out what you need to figure out. I think we give other people far too much credit, and we often assume if our challenges are more visible or more obvious that other people don't have them. Some people are just better at covering shit up. But I don't want to live an inauthentic life. I don't want to be fake. It's really funny when someone is interested in working with me and they schedule a free consultation and they meet me, if they're listeners of my podcast, ADHD-ish, one of the first things many of them say is, "You're exactly like you are on the podcast." Now, the first time I heard it, I thought, who the fuck else should I be? But because that would just be way too much effort. Because I've heard it so many times, I realize that a great many people are not presenting their authentic self to others. And that leads to all kinds of trust issues. And, we doubt ourselves because we think there's something sketchy about that person. Can't quite put my finger on it. That's your ADHD intuition. I don't care how many people rave about that person. If your Spidey senses are like, I don't know about this, trust that. And also don't assume that just because someone says they know what to do, that's marketing. That's not necessarily facts.
Exactly.
If you don't give up,
My team was recently going over my blacklist and they said there's this whole list of people that you said I don't like, but can we get a little bit more specific as to why you didn't like these people? And I asked the team to please divide it up into two groups: the people who I said I didn't like before I met them and the people who I said I didn't like after I met them.
ah,
If I said I didn't like you, because my EA correctly pointed out that sometimes I'll be like, well, I don't think I'm going to like that person. And I'll get on a call with them and be like, I was wrong, totally wrong. Sorry. Their profile read differently than they do. I really like them. If I spent 15 minutes with that person and I told you after that I didn't like them, don't reverse engineer why I didn't like them. It doesn't matter. And that's one of our golden rules. If I actually spent time with you and I said I didn't like you, even if I cannot point out a reason, we don't work with that person ever.
it's good enough.
It took me 30 years to get to a point where it was good enough for me to say, I just don't like you and be okay with that. Because for me, otherwise, I needed evidence. Just
Right.
like I have evidence for my inconsistency, I need evidence for why I have decided to eliminate this thing. see, for me, with my ADHD brain, my autism side
Mhm,
loves the data.
mhm.
Give me as much data as humanly possible. I want to just chomp it up and divide it up into little pieces and understand everything completely perfectly. It takes all the energy that I could be spending on being consistent in my own way to
Mhm.
whatever I choose. I'm spending on attempting to collect evidence to prove myself right when somebody else might suggest that perhaps I don't have enough evidence to make the statement that I'm saying. And if any of y'all just followed that, first of all, 10 points, go get a fruit snack.
And I will also say that I think that this I don't think it's uniquely female, but I think that the way women are conditioned to be nice, to be, to get along, to let somebody else have the last cookie, to focus more on the needs of others. Don't be greedy, don't be selfish, don't be bossy. If you have ADHD, that might be really hard from the jump. But also, this notion that we should like everyone unless they give us a reason not to, that really denies the true value of intuition, which I think people with autism and people with ADHD have much more than neurotypicals. We may not be able to put it into words, and because neurotypicals demand reasons and evidence, we then go down that research rabbit hole. We're like, I got to justify this for the same reason why one of my other core principles is called the default yes, and why so
Mhm.
many of us agree to things and commit to things and say yes to things that we have no business doing because it feels like yes is always the right answer. And if you can't articulate a reason for why it's a no, it can't be a no. And it takes a lot more energy to figure out why it's a no. If you just know in your gut, I don't want to do it, honor that. Now, if you don't want to do anything, that's maybe a little bit of a different problem. But if it's somebody says, "Oh, let's collab," or "Let's do this," or "I want to introduce you to these people," or "Come to this thing," or "Join this club," or whatever, if you're just like, I, it's not because you're an introvert. It's not because you're antisocial. It's like there's something about this that doesn't feel right. Honor that. You will have a much easier time of figuring out what you can be consistent at if you honor your innate wisdom about what attracts you and what repels you. And that's something anyone listening can actually start working on now. Don't dismiss your own intuitive wisdom, even if you don't articulate it to other people, because eventually we become more discerning, we become more discriminating, and then we can acquire the skills of saying no without a whole long rationale or an apology. And that will save you a fuck ton of time doing the wrong things.
What you're describing, Diane, is really it's permission. It's
Yep.
permission to build it differently. It's permission to do it differently. It's permission to think whatever the fuck you're thinking without having to verbalize it to someone else. It's permission to do the thing or not do the thing. And that's everything. That's what we're here for. When we say
Mhm.
consistency, I'm not consistent. I'm not consistent, like you said at the beginning, according to my ideal perfect
Mhm.
vision of what consistent needs to be, or what I've determined someone else's consistency is, or what I've decided based on very little information that they must be doing. So therefore, I have to do the same thing that they're doing. And no, you
And
don't.
it's audacious, actually, and I'm grateful that you are perceiving it this way and reflecting this back because I have heard this from a couple of clients I recently wrapped up with, and I have them fill out a feedback form. It may be a testimonial of sorts, and the last couple of clients who graduated from working with me have said, "One of the most important things I gained from working with you was permission to be who I already am and figure out what actually works for me instead of trying to contort myself into some other format because that's what I was taught, or that's what my competitors are doing, or that's what I've internalized as the right way to do it." I think, if you're just getting started in business, everything that that Avi and I have talked about today may sound like, well, good for you. That sounds nice. It does take time. I will be the first one to say this is a process. It is a process of challenging your beliefs. It is a process of learning new ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. And it's also a process of unlearning the way we've been taught to think and releasing old beliefs about ourselves and about the right way to do things as we're able to do so. It is something that takes time, but it starts with giving yourself permission to start paying attention to what actually works for you so that you can figure out how to do more of that. And that's something that's as simple as, not easy, simple. Like, I'm going to start looking for ways to make this easier by reducing friction and fatigue. I'm going to work in alignment with my natural gifts. I'm going to work in alignment with what works for me. I'm going to stop trying to conform to the norm. You're going to get a lot further, a lot faster, and you're going to be a lot happier at the same time. Facts.
Absolutely. What I hear a lot from people is like, I don't know what I want. Like, okay, what know what you want? When you come up against something and you don't want it, do you know that you don't want it?
Yeah.
If so, start there. That's
Yeah.
good too.
The process of elimination is totally legit. And I think a lot of people don't know what they want because they have been spending so much energy trying to convince themselves that they want what everyone else wants or what they've been told they should want. So, or what they used to want and they outgrew. We do tend to be people who get very excited about something for a period of time and may eventually outgrow it. A number of my clients are serial entrepreneurs, and they did not realize they were. They thought, I need your help to get me to fall back in love with my business so I can do it for another 20 years. And I say, well, what if that's not the goal here? What if we build your next business with the exit strategy in mind instead of thinking, I just need to force myself to keep doing this indefinitely? Some of us can do something for 5 years, but not for 50. And there's nothing wrong with that if you accept it and you work with it instead of trying to force yourself to do what you think you're supposed to do. If I had one lesson in my life that I have learned from being a person with ADHD that I wish I had learned much, much sooner, is that you don't have to stick with something indefinitely for it to be valuable to you. You can let it go and you can grow into your next thing, and you don't have to feel ashamed about it. You get to rewrite your own narrative. And if other people say, oh, you really do seem to have a hard time sticking with things, don't you? Can I ask you why you decided to share that little bit of information with me? Oh, just food for thought. Sounds more like food to choke on,
Good
you
for
know?
your thought, baby.
Like, it's like, yeah, well, that's just how I roll. Any other feedback you want to give me? Like, can I go now?
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
We all
Some
experience that.
people just say things to say things, and it doesn't
Right?
really have anything to do with you at all. I'm ways because genuinely, also, I think this is going to be such an interesting place to kind of wrap up because we are going long. But speaking to you, we are both, correct me if I'm wrong if this doesn't land for you, but the way I experience you, we are both very strong women who people might interpret as being masculine, definitely as being very solid on their own 2 feet, quick-witted, sharp-tongued. If I have some shit to say, you're going to hear it. And I don't know if the journey was the same for you, but I've always had those thoughts. It was just a matter of whether I was allowing my mouth to say the words that my brain was thinking. And the more I allow my mouth to say the words that my brain is thinking, the more aligned I am with people, the more I attract people who can handle me. And if you cannot handle me, go away. I don't have time to coddle your inability to handle me. Whereas in the past, if you couldn't handle me, that was an indication that I was too much to handle. Not too much
Mhm.
to handle. I'm too much for you to handle. That's okay.
Yeah,
That doesn't say anything bad about me.
no, ever since I was a teenager, I've had people tell me that I'm intimidating.
Mhm.
And I tried to figure out why that was and what I could do to reduce it. And what I realized eventually was that that's not a me problem. That's a them problem. And that really came true for me when my own daughter reached her teens and she started hearing the same thing. And I'm like, oh, hell no.
Oh,
And so
no.
I realized, no, this is not about me. This is that, a woman who doesn't follow the rules, who isn't quiet and demure and submissive and keeps her thoughts to herself. And it's kind of like, the children don't speak unless spoken to kind of thing. If I have something to say, I don't just go around talking to people who don't want to hear what I have to say, but if I have an opinion that I think can add to the conversation, I will share it. And for some people, and also the swearing, I use a lot of spicy language. I've had so many people say, "Oh, I'd love to be able to recommend your podcast, but you really do swear an awful lot. And if you would just really stop doing that, I would really love to help shut all the way up. I'm not interested." Because the people that would not be interested in what I have to say because I use some spicy language,
Mhm.
they're not my people. Why would I wanna build a bigger audience of not my people? Not
Right.
interested. But it did take time, and I think you were able to get there a little bit faster, and I think for me, that mostly had to do with, my childhood, which this isn't a therapy session for me, so we're not gonna go there, but, yeah, I was very intimidated, but I was adopted, and I had an abusive, narcissistic adoptive mother. So I grew up very intimidated by her, and I became a much smaller version of myself that has continued to unlearn those habits, and really, I think, picked up speed once I hit 50 because something magical happens when you stop producing so much estrogen. I did some research on this, as it turns out.
Wait, I'm so excited, girls. If I can give you one takeaway from today, the word consistent has been defined by people whose brains don't work like ours, whose brains don't work like yours. And you've been measuring yourself against that definition and losing on purpose because the game is rigged from the start. Diann showed us today what it looks like to build a different game, one that you can actually win, one that your brain can actually win because you were never inconsistent. You're just running in the wrong operating system and you're not broken. As we always say, the system is. Let's build a better system. Bye, squirrels. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here with us.